Hello and welcome back to Foreign Correspondents. I'm Somi Sorang with our panel of foreign journalists. Welcome to the program. The 2018 Inter-Korean Summit is just around the corner. It will be held this Friday, and the slogan for it is Peace and a New Beginning. Do you think this is a fitting title?
I think so. I mean, in many ways, you could pick a lot of these sort of generic titles for this type of an event. This one's vague enough where anything can be wedged into it, but Peace and a New Beginning sounds like a realistic goal. And it's a soft-sounding, soothing kind of slogan, so it seems fine to me.
Okay.
Yeah, totally agree with Matt. I mean, I'm not sure a summit needs a slogan, but if you have to choose one, I think it's a perfect one because there is the word peace in it, and as you said, it's vague enough to include many important things. So.
Okay.
Well, I like the part a new beginning because the conflict was so deadlocked and, you know, both sides were accusing each other of, let's say the West said you cannot negotiate with North Korea, it's a waste of time, they will cheat you. And North Korea also has some reason to be like concerned or paranoid about their security. And so I think it's good to say, like, let's erase the memories, let's start it new and give it a new try.
All right. With just 3 days remaining this week on Foreign Correspondents, the topic is preview for the April 27th Moon-Kim Summit. The Inter-Korean Summit will be held on April 27th and will be broadcast live all over the world. Working-level talks between the two Koreas were held on April 18th at Panmunjom on the North Korean side of Panmunjom. During the meetings, Seoul and Pyongyang agreed to broadcast live major events at the upcoming summit.
양 정상 간의 첫 악수하는 순간부터 회담의 주요 일정과 행보를 생방송으로 전 세계에 알리기로 합의했습니다.
Meanwhile, in addition to denuclearization, a treaty to formally end the Korean War is also being discussed as one of the major agendas of the summit.
이번 회담은 핵심 의제에 집중하게 되는 회담이라는 겁니다. 완전한 비핵화나 또 항구적인 평화 정착, 그로 인한 획기적인 관계 개선, 여기까지를.
US President Donald Trump also acknowledged that a peace treaty was being discussed during his summit meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
They do have my blessing to discuss the end to the war. People don't realize the Korean War has not ended. It's going on right now, and they are discussing an end to the war.
Media competition is also heating up ahead of the summit. According to the Inter-Korean Summit Preparatory Committee, around 2,800 local and foreign journalists have registered to cover the event. This is roughly double the number of press members compared to the second Inter-Korean Summit, which took place in 2007. In this week's edition of Foreign Correspondents, we sit down with our panel of journalists to zoom in on the Inter-Korean Summit and how things might look on the ground. So as a journalist, how do you usually prepare for such a huge news event like this?
I mean, of course, I follow news. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a big news day or not. So that's a given. But what I would do over the next few days, I would prepare my sources, the North Korea experts, South Korea experts, to get them ready that I can just call them because on this news day it's very hectic. So you want to make sure that everything is prepared.
Right. Now, if you had the chance to hold a Q&A session with President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un straight after the summit, what are some questions that you might ask?
Well, I guess it would depend on what they discussed at the summit or what news we learned about the summit. But I think definitely an interview with Kim would be more interesting than with Moon, who's relatively transparent about his thinking. I would love to ask Kim some very straightforward questions about what his intentions are for his country, for his economy, for his place on the world stage, and for his, you know, the Kim dynasty and how long that he foresees that, you know, as being a part of North Korean life.
Right. So the two Koreas, they held several working-level talks in the run-up to the summit. What are some issues, do you think, that might have been the most difficult to reach an agreement on?
I mean, there is many issues. For example, press coverage. How much do we allow the press to cover the summit? How do Kim Jong-un will arrive? Does he arrive by car, by walking, through which path? When do we take the picture? I mean, I'm sure they will want to have a very symbolic picture to take. We remember on the 2000 summit when, was it Kim Dae-jung, when he go down the plane and Kim Jong-il was waiting for him. So I'm sure they want some optics. That's important for them. There will be the issue of security. Of course, both leaders want to have the highest security. So all these issues are very important, and that's why it takes so much time to prepare a summit.
Right. Now, going back to North Korea, in April 14th, that was the North Korean founder Kim Il-sung's birthday, which is usually celebrated in Pyongyang with great fanfare. But this year was surprisingly low-key. Do you think they were being careful ahead of the summit?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's obvious. These days, North Korea doesn't mention very often, even never, the North Korean media don't mention the nuclear weapons. When South Korea and US organized a military exercise, they did not criticize it. I mean, we really see that they are restrained, and I think they're really trying to avoid any conflict to allow the summit to take place. It's striking, actually.
Okay.
I think you see that also on the US and South Korean side. You know, a little bit at the beginning of the Olympics, there was some conflict going on where people were questioning this and that. But since then, you've seen, like with the exercises, for example, the military exercises, they were not really formally announced, and the media coverage has not been really invited all that strongly. And so you're seeing restraint, and I think even a little bit of restraint from Washington. Like, trying to think back to the tweets, but I don't think that Donald Trump has said anything incendiary about Kim, you know, during the last few months. So yeah, I think we're seeing everyone try to set an environment that will be conducive to a positive summit.
Then how do you rate the possibility of Kim Jong-un throwing a surprise on the day of the summit? For example, not turning up on time or abruptly changing plans?
That's always a possibility, and given what happens between now and then, how these continuing working level talks, you know, that may or may not be happening in the background, if there's an envoy that goes, how those discussions go. And then, you know, if you remember back to previous summits, there was a flood, and at one summit, I believe the 2007 summit was delayed for a few days. So anything's possible, but I would be surprised if there was something that was done by him that would be perceived as provocative, that was done in a way to slight Moon or the process.
Intentionally?
Yes, right.
Right, okay. Now let's talk about the website. So the South Korean Summit Preparatory Committee, they set up an online platform where you can get background information and ongoing updates on the summit. Did you have a look at the website?
I did, yeah. I mean, it seems to me like a perfectly fine idea.
What was your impression?
I think the government is very careful not to repeat the mistake of the previous government, which was basically a total lack of communication, lack of transparency, and you see this in many aspects. That, you know, for example, also with the foreign media, like the ministers, they will spend much more time for Q&A sessions, and there's much more the willingness to communicate, and of course also to the public. And I think, yeah, it's important, and it's I think it's a good idea. Yeah.
Right. So you think it's part of the Moon administration's initiative to communicate more with the public. I think it'll be also very useful for those who are not well versed in North Korean politics, but nonetheless interested in the upcoming summit. What was your impression?
No, I think it's a good idea too. It's always, I mean, the more transparent, the better, right? I'm not too sure for the general public how much will really have access, will really try to use this website to get information. I think most of the public will go on Naver or check the news as usual. But as a journalist, it's great to have a homepage where you can have some pictures, some videos, some updates. Yeah, it's an excellent initiative.
Right. And also on the website, there will be ongoing live stream footage. Do you think this will be of use to the public, the general public?
Perhaps. I mean, we've seen just from what we understand about the Korean public's expectation of their media that live streaming events is just part of the process. We've seen caravans of vehicles taking people to jail where news reporters are following behind on a motorcycle with a television camera. So there's going to be some expectation that they will be able to follow things in real time. Now, getting back to the protocol and the discussions at the working level, what those images will be remain to be seen, I think.
Now, this upcoming summit isn't the first one, it's the third one. There were ones held previously in 2000 and 2007. So in this upcoming clip, we'll take a look at how the upcoming Friday summit will compare to the ones held prior. With the 2018 inter-Korean summit fast approaching, the two previous summits have been placed under a renewed spotlight. This time around, the most radical departure from the past is the venue itself. During the first inter-Korean summit on June 13, 2000, former President Kim Dae-jung was greeted at an airport in Pyongyang by then North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. Years later, on October 2, 2007, former President Roh Moo-hyun walked across the military demarcation line into North Korea to attend the second inter-Korean summit.
대통령으로서 이 금단의 선을 넘어갑니다. 평화와 번영의 길로 가는 그런 계기가 되도록 노력하겠습니다.
The two previous summits have always seen South Korea's leader traveling to Pyongyang to meet his North Korean counterpart. This time around, however, the third inter-Korean summit is being held not in Pyongyang, but at the Peace House on the southern portion of the truce village of Panmunjom. Not only has the venue changed, but the length and timing is also different. With the meeting to be held at the Peace House in Panmunjom, Kim Jong-un will become the first ever North Korean leader to set foot on South Korean soil.
우선 첫 번째는 판문점에서 회담이 열린다는 것입니다. 그리고 이것은 처음으로 북쪽의 정상이 남쪽을 방문한다는 의미가 함께 들어 있습니다.
Following the first inter-Korean summit, the two sides announced the June 15th North-South Joint Declaration, which promised bilateral efforts toward reunification. Meanwhile, the October 4th Joint Declaration was announced after the second inter-Korean summit, which called for the building of mutual trust and respect between the two Koreas. For the third and latest inter-Korean summit, broad agreements could be reached on denuclearization and peace of the Korean Peninsula, as well as measures to ensure lasting improvements in cross-border relations.
완전한 비핵화와 항구적인 평화 정착, 그리고 남북 관계의 지속 가능한 발전의 길로 나아갈 수 있는 두 번 다시 힘든 그런 기회가 열렸습니다.
The inter-Korean summit is being held once again after an 11-year hiatus, and it remains to be seen whether the latest meeting will go one step further than the previous summits in realizing the ultimate goal of lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. So what's your overall assessment of the two previous summits, the ones held in 2000 and 2007?
I know they were criticized by maybe the most conservative element in South Korean society, but they were really important for at least one aspect, is that they allow to reduce the tensions. Something that worries me about two Koreas, it's if conflict or war happens, it might be triggered by some accident. This kind of a summit, when you build trust, you really reduce the risk of war. So of course, this summit did not prevent North Korea to continue its nuclear program, but I think it contributed to slow this program. It contributed to open the North Korean economy. It contributed to bring information from the outside to North Korea. So they were important in so many aspects. So I'm very happy that we see another summit coming, and I have a lot of expectations of how they can change the dynamics between the two Koreas and hopefully open the North.
I want to add one more thing. After talking to many South Koreans of a specific generation, let's say in their 30s, for them the previous summits, they were really a turning point in how they perceived North Korea. I mean, that's a generation who still in elementary school had a very strong anti-communist education, and some thought of North Koreans as red devils and not really as real persons. And after the summits, they became more relaxed and more not demonizing everything that's from the North anymore. And in that regard, I think it helped a lot to reduce tensions.
Right.
And some images are memorable. I mean, the images of Kim Dae-jung and Kim Jong-il shaking hands. I remember I was when I was at university in South Korea, this image was, there was a huge poster in some rooms. It was very important for everybody. Or the image of Roh Moo-hyun when he crossed the border by foot to go to North Korea. That was some very memorable moments, actually.
Yeah. Now let's move on to President Moon Jae-in. So President Moon Jae-in was able to secure a meeting with the North Korean leader in less than a month since taking office. Why do you think, or how do you think he was able to get the ball moving so quickly?
Well, from the start, even during the campaign, he seemed to signal that he would be a different kind of a leader, be willing to say no to the United States. be eager to seek dialogue. So that set the environment where an overture could be accepted. And then I think the Olympics and also the fact that North Korea had gotten to a place where it was pretty confident with its nuclear program is really what got us to this place, as opposed to Moon's diplomatic efforts. Though certainly he deserves credit, and the unpredictability of Trump deserves some credit in getting us to this place. You guys may disagree. I don't know.
No, actually I don't. And I mean, I think it's obvious that I'm not a fan of Trump, just the opposite. But I think in this, for his Korea policy, I changed my mind and I changed my opinion. I think without Trump, probably wouldn't be at this point. But I think the most interesting or tragic period of Moon was actually when he just got into office, and there was exactly you could feel his goodwill, his intention, and for all his political career, he has been fighting for warming up the relations, maybe even a reunification. But then Kim Jong-un tested missiles in a speed that was never seen before. Trump was as provocative as never before, and then South Korea, who actually wanted to change things, was again, I mean, it was not in the driving seat, but it was like an extra in a thing that they couldn't control. But how Moon Jae-in helped turning around things was pretty impressive, I would say.
So do you think President Moon Jae-in's role in turning things around and setting up these two summits, he is now back in the driver's seat?
Yeah, I mean, as much as in the driver's seat as you can be in this conflict. Of course, it's a geopolitical conflict that you cannot blend out the regional powers. You can blend out China or the US or even Russia. So, but yeah, I think now this summit is really important actually to also let the public in the world know that it's a conflict mainly between those two Koreas, even though, of course, North Korea wants a peace treaty with the US. I mean, so they cannot solve this conflict on their own, but they should be the driving force, I would say.
And I think the way he managed to get a summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un is absolutely, I think that's major diplomatic skill there. And as you mentioned, I mean, I think it wouldn't have happened so fast without Donald Trump policy of strong pressure, and I think the threat of a military strike, I think that scared everybody, and that's why the process is going so fast now. But I don't want to deny Moon Jae-in's.
And then, yeah, just one last thing on that too. Moon kept faith despite what you were talking about with the repeated provocations and the sparring that was going on between North Korea and the U.S. and the criticism he was getting in the media. Even at the beginning of the Olympics, when his numbers started to go down, he kept the faith, and he deserves some credit for that. I think he also deserves credit for maybe exaggerating a bit when he praised Trump.
Yeah,
I think he saw that if anything that he's done was a diplomatic, smart diplomatic move, that was probably the smartest.
He had to please his ego, right?
Yeah. All right. And do you believe the outcome of the summit will have a significant bearing on Moon's approval ratings?
That's a good question. I mean, of course, at least his political opponents will watch very closely and on every mistake that he does, and they will try to make political capital out of it. But let's be honest. I mean, Moon's approval rating was far more influenced on when he talked about banning cryptocurrency than actually what he did with North Korea. And he was, in the first place, he was elected. To solve issues like the chaebol problem, unregulated chaebols, the social inequality, the high level of irregular workers, and the growing social inequality. And so I think, yeah, of course it will affect his approval ratings, but I think it's not as much as many people in the West would believe, for example.
So you don't think it's as significant of an issue compared to other issues that you've already mentioned?
I mean, if he doesn't do any major mistakes, let's say if there would be a scandal like the previous summit, that there would be some cash flow going to North Korea. I think Moon Jae-in is aware that this will cost him his political career. But other than that, I think he should be fine.
Do you agree?
Yes, totally. I think maybe as a media, we focus too much on the approval ratings. I don't think it matters that much, actually, especially in the case of Moon Jae-in, where his approval rating is already spectacularly high. Right. So a small variation that could be provoked by many factors, as Fabian mentioned, not only the summit. So it doesn't matter so much. As you said, what matters is he doesn't make any huge political mistake. I think it's important, and as you mentioned before, that during the summit, everybody will look at what Moon Jae-in can get from Kim Jong-un without giving major concession first. And I think he's skillful enough not to make that type of mistake. But once again, the approval rating doesn't matter so much, actually.
Well, then continuing on from Fabienne's answer, what kind of scenario would lead to a significant jump in his approval rating or a significant decline?
I mean, a significant jump would be Kim Jong-un making a major, officially, like making a major concession and allow to move the process forward. And a major mistake would be, I mean, I remember during the Namibia summit, there was some scandal related to some promises he made, or some declaration he made related to the maritime borderline. So I think this kind of stuff, Moon Jae-in has to be very careful, but I think he's good enough to avoid this kind of mistake now.
So you think he's very well aware, enough to avoid those?
I mean, he was working with Namibia during the second summit, so I think he's extremely aware.
Yeah, I agree. I think the big difficulty for South Korean presidents in the past in terms of their approval has been personal and political scandal and the economy. And those are outside of often the president's control, and in some ways, and this summit won't fit into that category. I think one way he could get into trouble outside of the policy questions about what's determined, what's the outcome, what happens with Trump next, is if there are things that aren't transparent, if there are secret deals, money exchanges, things that could, they fit into the narrative that so frustrated the public about Park and A. So I think he will try to avoid anything that can be perceived that way.
And I'm a bit tired of the dictatorship of polls. I mean, he's a president for the next 4 years, so he has to pursue his vision. He has a policy to do. He has a job to do. So whether like little fluctuation in the approval rating should not matter so much. And if he spends his days looking at the approval rating and taking his decision of that, you go nowhere. Right. So he really has to follow his vision, and I think that's what he's doing.
Right. I think to achieve something, you need to be somewhat deaf to opinions from time to time. So going forward from here, what kind of steps do you think the Moon Jae-in administration needs to take in order to build upon the summit and make further inroads to improving cross-border relations?
So Moon has to manage his relationship with Trump and the expectations that Trump is going to have about his meeting, and talking about being in the driver's seat. I mean, Trump let the South Koreans announce his own summit. So it seems like Moon's done a pretty good job of managing that relationship. The other will be just managing public expectation here.
And I hope that they will come up with creative ways to build trust between the two Koreas. I remember this project a couple of years ago of building a peace park on the DMZ. I mean, why not trying some measure to reduce the level of armament? But I really hope that this kind of dialogue allows some solution that nobody thought of, and I'm sure there is many ways to reduce tension, build trust between the two Koreas, and open borders.
Yeah, I think now it's important to really keep the communication going. I mean, there are also like many humanitarian exchanges that you can do, or also academic exchanges. For example, I mean, there are many extinct bird species on both sides of the peninsula. You could work on that. There are, for example, linguists, like people who work on a so-called unified dictionary, because both of the languages, they separated also during the last 6 or 7 decades. So I think there are many things that you can do, and the communication channels should not like break off. I think they should be steady.
So keep the communication channels open, and more sort of cultural exchanges between the two Koreas.
And that is why the hotline between Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in is a very encouraging thing too.
Okay. Do you have any final comments?
No, you mentioned the hotline. I guess, one thing as historic as this summit's going to be is, at the end of it, will they use that hotline? And will they have personal charisma, and will they establish trust? And how will that affect the relationship going forward? That to me is interesting. Getting back to the very beginning of our discussion, what would you ask? You would ask about their personal rapport, and that could go a long way. So I'm hoping that maybe we get some imagery of the interaction between them, so we can judge that a little.
Okay. Fabian, do you have any final comments?
Well, I don't want to end too pessimistically. Actually, we are all very euphoric about the possibility that peace is finally, at least, you can think of it, and on the midterm, it's possible. But I think we are definitely on a crossroads. The status quo will not remain, but if the talks fail, I mean, it could go either way. But of course, I hope for the best there.
Okay, Fred?
Yeah, that will be a very historic moment, and as a journalist, it's a privilege to be able to cover it directly. I'm very excited.
Yeah, we were just talking before the show that as a foreign journalist, perhaps anywhere, compared to anywhere else in the world, Korea is the best place because that's where all the news is happening right now. Okay. That's all the time we have for today, so we'll have to wrap up there. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we mentioned earlier, the slogan for the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit is Peace and a New Beginning. So hopefully this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity will bring about a new beginning, a season of peace, not just for Korea, but for the world at large. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.